evening, good evening. Happy to be here during the dinner hour for our conversation on AI. Fun fact, in 2017, the UAE named the first Minister of AI, His Excellency Omar Sultan Al Olama. Yes, yes, give it up for this fun fact. We are at the center of excellence around AI, so it just behooves us to have this conversation this evening. We are going to have a little bit of a different conversation. We're going to have a dinner conversation while we're having dinner. We're going to just make a fun moment of this. We know that AI is revolutionizing business across all sectors. We also know that there are estimates that there will be $4.4 trillion in capital across many sectors, including financial services, education, and professional services. But we're going to start this conversation off with the heart of AI. I want to know from each of you, because we're at dinner, if you could call upon anyone, dead or alive, to talk to at dinner about AI, who would that person be? Now, I'll give you a little time to think, because I know Alan Turing would be a favorite, right? Alan Turing, he is the, just an icon in the space. And his Turing tests, where he said a computer would deserve to be called intelligent if it could deceive a human into believing that it was human. That's the Turing test. And so if I was having dinner, and I could call anyone to talk to, I'd love to have Alan at the table. So I'd love to get our dinner guests in on this and give us your take on who you'd like to talk to around AI, alive or not, and what would you say to them about the moment that we're in? Prim, I'm going to start with you. I mean, you're a great dinner guest.
I was going to hope you'd start on the other end so I can keep thinking about who
I'm going to start with you. I mean, first
That's
of all,
okay, let's do it.
Well, Prim here has, your background. You've been behind the movies Avatar. You've been a part of Black Panther. I mean, your expertise in Hollywood and entertainment is just massive. I want to know, who would you like to have at your table?
Actually thinking about, and thank you for that, I actually think Leonardo da Vinci, because all we do at Stability AI is we do image, video, 3D, so this is a continuation of my previous work in the film business. We're actually making applications for the creative artists. So I would love to speak to the greatest creative artist of all time and ask him all kinds of questions about the efficiencies of what AI could actually bring to even his process, because he was such a scientist as well as an artist. And that's just the space that I love to be in, which is art and science, which is actually always said together for a reason. And so I would love to know what he thinks, because I have many artist conversations, and many of the artists that I speak to say, I don't want the AI to help me make more art so I can have more time to do dishes and clean my house. I want AI to clean my house and do dishes so I could do my art. But the real truth of the matter is there's a lot of dishes and a lot of cleaning that you do in the artistic process. And if we can eliminate that part of it, and so an artist can just focus on the art, that'd be something I'd be very interested in hearing him talk about.
I love it. Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, he's on the list. He's with Alan Turing, Leonardo
Da Vinci,
DiCaprio.
but yeah, both of them, either one, either Leonardo, Da Vinci or Leonardo. The other one's still alive.
This is dinner. This is what happens at dinner. You have Da Vinci.
There was tequila backstage.
They're both Leonardo.
I do have a question around where the cocktail of AI, quantum, and blockchain, how does that taste? But we'll talk about that later.
That sounds like a good drink, too.
So, Kate, you have had a wonderful career in AI, and you've been at NVIDIA. You now have your own company, CEO of Amina. I'd love for you to give us your take, and just particularly also interested in the world that you're building in emerging markets, and particularly on the continent of Africa.
Yeah, I think if I could have dinner with one person, it would actually be my grandfather. He was kind of cool. He was one of the first African graduates of the French National Police School, studied at Washington Academy, was working for Interpol, met Kennedy, traveled the world, and still decided to come back to his country to build his country and be chief of national police. Unfortunately, killed by a dictator back in the days, but his perspective on the world and how he's been able to learn from many different places, still take what he could and brought it to his country to rebuild really Central African Republic is something that inspires me a lot and has followed me throughout my journey. And this is what also inspired me to quit my job in New York City and move to Nairobi and build from the ground in Africa.
Wonderful. So what's your grandfather's name again?
Joseph.
Joseph. So we have
Yeah.
Joseph, Da Vinci, Turing, Rohan. Who else is at the table? Rohan, you are at Builder AI, which is
That's right.
massive in the AI software space. Would love to get your take on who would you like to have at the table?
Absolutely. Well, I think for me it would have to be Ada Lovelace, and I'd probably put them right beside Turing. Look, I think one of the core principles that Ada Lovelace really showed was that technology could be used not just as an analytical engine, but also to help people with their creative pursuits, right? And I think that's something we're seeing so much of today. I think we forget that even in creative pursuits, the things that we think makes us humans unique, there's still so much repetitive tasks that can be automated, that can allow us to focus on that 10, 15% that really takes us to the next stage.
Awesome, awesome. Grant, want to get you to weigh in here. You're the founder, chairman, and CEO of Red Cell Partners. You have an extensive background in health tech as well as AI across lots of different verticals. Would love to get your take on who should be at this table.
Sure. Thank you. I would probably say Isaac Newton for a variety of reasons, but I don't think you can overstate the power that AI will have. And similarly, inventing gravity and challenging the conventional wisdom that the Earth didn't, the sun and the Earth had this relationship, and we spin around, the sun spins around us, but then maybe not. And I think that similarly, in terms of how the world will change, from the time that he wrote in his notebook to today, has been a micro fraction of the human experience. And from that moment to today has been an incredible change in technology and the impact technology has had on life. And I think looking back, AI could be as consequential as gravity or that heliocentricity being brought into question. And I think, having as an entrepreneur, being able and willing to challenge the church and the conventional wisdom, AI is doing a lot of the same things. What were thought of as moated, untouchable industries are now as ripe for disruption as they've ever been. And I think he'd be a fun guy to talk to for a variety of reasons.
This is great. Well, we're at dinner, and so at dinner, we're going to always talk about movies. What movies do we like? Who are the villains? Who are the heroes? And what's the plot of the story? When we're talking about AI and technology, a couple of movies come up. Terminator, Star Trek, Minority Report, Gattaca, The Matrix. We talked about, had a session earlier, we're talking about Interstellar. I love the series Black Mirror, I guess I'm telling on myself, in terms of what the potential of AI and advanced technology in the hands of the hero or the villain, how that could impact society. I'd love for you all to give us a sense of where you see AI in the hero of your work as a hero, and where you see AI as something that could maybe be more malevolent. Would love to get a sense of what those applications and experiences are when you're turning AI for good, and whether AI has the consequences that are perhaps unexpected. Who wants to jump in?
I'll go. I think that the interesting thing about AI is you're fundamentally taking an enormous amount of intelligence and power, and you're packaging it in this incredibly fluid, liquid, you can organize intellectual capital now with AI in ways you never could before. And I think the hero and the villain concept, I would challenge in the age of AI, I don't think there's going to be this polar good guy versus bad guy. I think the multipolar, massive amounts of gray that come between good and bad are reflective ultimately of what Jensen Huang always says is like AI is not taking your job, but the people that know how to use, deploy, and scale AI will. And so because of that, those people are human. And I think the question will really be how much human emotion and decision making will we cede. And we still make a lot of emotional decisions as people. And I think the first villain will come in this discussion when we are presented with an opportunity to automate something that fundamentally makes the human experience worse. But in terms of the conventional training and how you're building your AI, in that infrastructure, it's the right decision. And I think that those are the things that sort of keep me up at night. And the asymmetric power of AI. I spent a lot of time in cyber. And the example I like to use is North Korea has $1 billion ransomware business a year, and that $1 billion ransomware a year is being more and more automated every year. And now that money goes into the Kim family's nuclear weapons program. And so you can draw a line very quickly. And we would, I think, describe the North Koreans as evil by most, by most conventional wisdom. But now you have a great example that AI product is helping a population in a country that we're at war with, or technically at war with. And so you're using AI to create funds for something strategic, in this case, a nuclear weapon. And I think we're just scratching the surface of that. And what I always tell people is if you want to punch back at North Korea, what do? Take the grid down in Pyongyang? What if North Koreans want to take the grid down in Washington, D.C.? There's a massive asymmetry there. And so I think AI starts to blend the art of the possible with a dropping of barriers that might otherwise, like a nuclear weapon, has an enormous command and control infrastructure. The things that an individual can do with compute and a laptop is stunningly powerful.
Okay. Rohan.
Yeah, I think, I'll tell you a little bit about something that I've been talking to a lot of technology leaders about recently, and that's really kind of the changing role of a software engineer in a world where you can generate code now that is quite usable. One of the things I've already started seeing is from our senior engineers at Builder, they are now empowered by code generation. They can take generated code, and their role changes more to editing and validating that generated code. Right? They're able to become that more efficient where instead of starting with a blank slate, they're starting with a rich starting point and then building up upon that. And that's really where you have this huge efficiency boost, right? It's amazing. But the flip side of this is the role of the junior software engineer, where traditionally they were the ones doing that. They were the ones creating that initial starting point for someone else to build upon. What happens to them in this world now? What happens to that funnel of engineers? How do you get senior engineers 15 years from now or 10 years from now if you don't have a way to train your juniors anymore, if their role is slowly eroded? And that's where I think you do need a change in the way we educate engineers, and the way it has to start there. It's the only way for this to really work. You have to have a way that we do our training in companies a bit differently now, right? Our graduate onboarding programs will have to change to account for this.
If we input into ChatGPT or any AI, if we ask them what to do with the junior engineers, what would it say?
That's a great question. I should actually try that to see what it would come up with.
Find out. Kate?
So I would agree with you, and I think I would actually call the heroes of the story the developers. So when you look at the way AI innovation is being driven in Africa, is actually a bottom-up innovation that comes from grassroots communities, developers that are congregating, building, and solving hackathons and boot camps and such. And for me, they're the true heroes of the story. It's like kids discovering they have superpowers all of a sudden, and they can actually accomplish things that are bigger than themselves. And if I had to name a villain, I think it would be our community if we don't do what's right to provide these kids access to compute, research models, algorithm, basically give them the tools that they need to build the future of their communities and their countries.
Thank you, Kate.
So we're in the creative arts. So the hero in my world for AI and what we're actively building applications for is eliminating the two evil elements in film production process, which is time and money. So if we're creating tools to could greatly reduce that and democratize content creation. So anybody, whether a dreamer or a storyteller in Nairobi or someone who's privileged that lives in LA and wants to tell their story are equal. And that they would have the equal amount of tools to tell a visual media story. The evil in that, I think, is actually that people talk about all the time, which is job loss in the industry, where, and I think that's actually a temporary evil, because while a rotoscope artist or paint, roto, and camera match, all these types of different workflows in the film process are very laborious. They're going to be eliminated or curtailed very quickly by a machine doing it. I think those people are going to actually just increase their skill sets into another level, and actually, because no one actually dreamed about being a rotoscope artist. I mean, maybe there's one person in the world who finds their zen place in doing that, because it's a very laborious by pixel by hand type job that feature films even today do. I think they're going to want to, they got into that creative world doing a non-creative job in order to be a storyteller. And I think they'll ultimately be able to, as Grant was mentioning, use AI to actually increase their creativity and actually upscale their job in the creative community. So I think that's where it is. And I think this whole dream about eliminating actors is kind of a joke as well. I think that actors, that's actually the easy part of filmmaking. I think it's much easier to just shoot plate photography with actors and have them act, and then use AI for all the other laborious kind of like needlepoint type of work.
You know, there's a generation that's being born into AI, right? They are going to see AI as a teacher, a creative partner, a mentor. AI may be their financial planner, a friend, a guide, an agent. For some, a romantic interest. Like we have a generation growing up where AI is going to serve a lot of roles in their life. I'd like you all to just play big brother, big sister. What would you say to this younger generation that has this much access and exposure to AI, and how they would use it, you know, all the things that they could potentially do? What would you kind of guide them on how to use and leverage AI, and what to maybe guard against? Big sister, Kate.
I've actually had this conversation with my little sister, for real, about a year ago. And she's still a student, and she was telling me about her friends who uses ChatGPT for everything. And that's the moment where I was, oh, interesting. Are you sure? Yeah, everything. Everything from school, even like simple searches. ChatGPT is the source of truth. So I've had to sit her down for the first time and have this conversation where I had to make sure that she gets educated. She understands the positives, but also the negatives, how this technology is being trained, what are the data sets that are going into those models, and why those models are not to be trusted as the single source of truth. And really for her to make sure that she fact checks everything that she's getting from those tools. So that's what I would say, much broader to the young generation today, and making sure that they are actually understanding how to use those tools, because these are just tools. They're not an end. They're a means to an end. They will help you be more efficient. They will help you accelerate a lot of the tasks that you're trying to achieve. But they will not be the only thing that gets you to the end game. So it's a bit of a caution for them.
Big brother Prem, what would you say to the younger generation?
I'm trying to think about my conversations I've had with my kids. My son would love ChatGPT to answer all his questions on his tests and things, that's for sure. My daughter, on the other hand, he's 13. My daughter at 15, I argue with her all the time. She's actually wanting to not use any of it, and but she's starting into it now. I think it's kind of interesting because they're born into the internet world, that's for sure, so they know no world without internet, and they essentially are going to know no world without AI. I love what you were talking about, which is you've got to really be able to trust the sources. And there's a lot of really responsible AI companies that are doing that. And I commend that type of work that they're doing, like Anthropic and others. But I think as long as they look at it as a single source of as a tool, and not really, and the end product needs to be the combination of, again, of an art and science, and that they have to bring in some creativity and storytelling to what they're using that tool. I think that's going to be the most important thing.
Great. Big Brother Grant.
I guess I should say I was technically a senior advisor at the NSA, so probably don't comment since they were Big Brother. Guess that wasn't very funny. I have 2 boys, so I tell them a lot right now, much like what Prem said, they're a tool, but especially in my opinion, and you used the example of being born into this age of AI and everything being connected. There's a really interesting study that came out that online dating, it takes men between 50 and 200 more swipes to get one date, and that as a great example. Like, that's a tool, but the consequences of what that will have on society are massive. Like, you need to go be in the real world, like spend time with people, develop relationships. AI is a product, it's a tool, it's an amazing tool. It can automate an incredible amount of things. And then you now are a 15-year-old boy and you have the world at your fingertips. What do you do? Yeah. And I think what I really want, my kids to think about and spend time on is building things of consequence. And AI is an incredible force multiplier for bringing positivity and uplifting the world around you. Or, like we talked about earlier, it can be used for terrible things. And I would make sure you spend your time and think a lot about how you can create positive impact and positive consequence, because if you're not thinking about that, you're probably closer to the bad guy in the story. And so I really want to spend a lot of time on like the moral and ethical perspective behind this incredible piece of technology. And that's why like the Newton piece for me is interesting, right? The whole world changed after Newton. The whole world's going to change after AI. And I think that what that means is get back to like the real world, get back to human connection. We saw what happened with COVID. I think that's a petrifying tale that in the age of AI would be materially worse. If that was 10 years from now, I can't even begin to fathom the social ramifications of everybody being glued to their phone. Like one of my favorite examples, sorry to go on, you now have online gaming and gambling inculcated into a phone that has a dopamine loop associated with it. So now you're making literal physical change in someone's brain. What are the implications of that on, my 2 kids, or they're young boys? Like, I want to understand where the physical and the changes in a brain, the brain chemistry, get tied back to technology. And those are the things I'd want to talk about between Big Brother, Big Sister.
Yeah. Rohan.
Yeah, I think it's not just the younger generation. It's funny, I think we're seeing a shift with the older generation also trying to relearn and re-educate themselves on how to leverage these tools effectively. Funny enough, my mother called me last week and she said, son, I'm taking a course on LLMs. I said, why? Why are you doing that? She said, well, I want to learn how to use this in my day-to-day life. I said, well, maybe instead of taking a course about how LLMs work, it's more important to understand how to leverage them. Look at prompt engineering as a starting point, right? And really, growing up for me, I grew up in a world where search engines were readily available. We had access to information through that. And we used to say that what separated a good engineer, analyst, or researcher from a great one was knowing how to Google, right? Knowing how to look something up and find the answer. With AI, it's basically the same concept as far as I'm concerned. It's learning how to leverage them effectively to get information more easily available. And if you can learn how to then put that in your day-to-day life in a way where you can use it to pull up information, but still validate it, It still is up to us to be able to validate it ourselves, to know that that information is not only what we're looking for, but is also accurate. And I think that's where things like model traceability really come into play. Being able to go and check the sources to say, yep, okay, this is where that information was pulled from in this data set. I know it's here, and I can go to the original source and double check that.
So I want to talk about something that the Milken Institute is doing. Last year, we launched Leaders in Tech. We convened thought leaders at our global conference in LA and had questions, and we had conversations and convenings around leading in the next generation of tech. We have since built an advanced technology initiative, which are focused on solutions related to advanced tech policy and governance, economic impact of AI, developing inclusive innovation ecosystems, and enhancing supply chain resilience. We are focused on the policy work that needs to happen around this. There's ethics, there's safety issues, there's security issues. I'd like to ask you, we don't have a global AI framework. It doesn't exist. We haven't harmonized all of our AI rules and regulations and guardrails. It hasn't happened yet. But in lieu of that, you all are meant to self-regulate, right? You're meant to look at the issue and address it in a way that you believe is ethical. I'd love to get a sense from you, what ethics do you bring to the table in lieu of rules right now? And at the time that we do have a global harmonization around AI, one day perhaps, what would you like to see included in that? Prem, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. You're going to have to call on people, otherwise. Yeah. So one of the things we have to deal with, and everybody's going to have to deal with in our space, certainly doing Gen AI, is the AI EU Act. So that goes into effect later in 2025. So we're already adhering to that, which means that one of the key elements of that is really making sure we have a sanitized or traceable data training set, and we're not using anything that is copyrighted, and if we are, then we either have permission or it's truly open source, we're licensing that. So that's one thing. The second is we have many enterprise customers that are multi-billion-dollar companies out there, and so we need to make sure that we have really safe inference and safe output, and it's not doing anything that's not safe for work or things. So what we do is like what you said, we self-regulate, and we have automatic prompt rewrites actually that the consumer is not aware of or the customer is not aware of, to where if they do put in a celebrity name, for example, we'll actually rewrite that prompt to where it comes out in a Painterly format or it comes out in Illustrator version, so it's not a real photo, because obviously that's something that's very important for us to get right, and we have significant amount of workflows on top of our model that we custom build to make sure that you're not getting any adult content, for example, like that's being outputted. So that's one thing that's us at Stability and our model Stable Diffusion really do. But your point is well taken. That is self-regulated right now.
Ron.
Yeah, I think at Builder we have a slightly different flavor of the same issue, which is we provide, so at Builder we allow anyone to be able to build custom software with ease. Now, one of the problems we've run up against sometimes is when people are leveraging our platform to build software, a lot of times what they're planning on using it for. And that can lead you down a bit of a rabbit hole where if they're going to use it for something, not malicious, but something perhaps that is borderline, ethically not, savory, that's where I think it's very important to have a strong code of ethics within your company to be able to know when you draw the line, right? Where do you say no to certain projects that come in? We had, for example, a silly example, we had one that somebody was trying to scrape websites. We didn't know which websites, but we knew it would violate the terms and conditions of those websites, right? Technically, you're providing a tool for someone trying to build something like that. You're not breaking the law, you're not violating terms and conditions, but your customer knowingly will. Where do you accept that? Do you not accept that? And it's very important to have that codified in your standard practices, because in normal business operations, it can be very easy for these things to get lost, right? A salesperson applies pressure, it gets pushed through. At least this way, if you have that codified from the get-go and have that as part of your business practices, you can prevent those kind of things from making it into production.
Grant.
So I'm in healthcare and cyber, and there's lots of regulations in both cases. I think with AI, unfortunately, we don't have a very large body of evidence that supports massive global institutions that can regulate something of the size of United Health Group or Amazon and something like a startup. And so that's an underdeveloped muscle. And so my suggestion would be just start. It's sort of like building a company. All the sort of grand plans of having these incredible ethical structures, that's great. If we can get there, that'd be wonderful. Between now and then, there's so much technical progress that's being made. I just would encourage everyone to start. And an example that I have is we have a company that I started called Zephyr AI. And our job, we use exorbitant amounts of data to try and glean new drug targets for oncology and cardiometabolic diseases like obesity and diabetes. And started that company. It's 3 years old, 3.5 years old. I was at a conference much like this. Someone came up to me afterwards and said, have you taken the reciprocal of your drug targets and put those into any type of production environment where people could learn from them? And I didn't understand the question. And the answer was, it's a continuum. If I have targets over here that can cure non-small cell lung cancer, I can take the reciprocal and figure out how to make something materially worse. And so it was an example where my co-founders, I never considered that one time. And now you can't take it out of our thinking, our perspective, how we look at product. When you look at a continuum of the biological impact, I now can see the positive and the negative. And so it's an example where the regulation, if you will, was really bounded by the creative process. And I think the more you can put into the light and the more you can just start regulating and engaging, the better off we'll be. And I think the whole, will one company have these ethical standards? I mean, there's not a lot of positive ways that story ends. And if we think that some of these companies are just going to be this incredible ethical gold standard globally, I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Kate.
I think for us, it has been slightly different because we're dealing with data, specifically geospatial and environmental data, so a lot of data coming from satellites. A lot of companies like ours, historically, they've made a lot of money from selling into military and defense. And very early in the company, we've had governments coming to us and saying, well, you have all this data on Africa, you have all this data on a lot of emerging economies. Have you thought about selling for border security, for example? But it's a line that we've had to draw really quickly because we're an impact-driven company. So for us, we've always wanted this data to be used to understand climatic conditions, which is slightly on the other side of the spectrum than defense and military. So it's something that we've had internally, and we've actually had to say no to a lot of customers and a lot of projects because we don't want to compromise the nature of our business. And I think it's a very slippery slope. If you actually say yes to one project under the premises that, oh, I'm going to help one government protect their borders or protect themselves against X, Y, and Z, you're actually going to take on more and more and more, and it will be really, really hard to get out of that rabbit hole. So that's the line we decided to draw as a company, and since then, most of our business actually comes from private sector companies looking at supply chain intelligence for their first mile of the supply chain. We're even redistributing information in the hands of the people for free. So we've really kept that impact-driven nature, and we will keep it until the end. But it has to be self-regulated, is ethics that we have inside the company, and it's a line that we know we will not cross.
I have one more question for all my dinner guests. This has been great. Unlimited capital. I'm going to give you all unlimited capital. You can spend it as you wish. What AI investments are you going to make with that unlimited capital? No barriers, no limits, no one giving you rules around how you can spend.
We have to do it in AI. I want a really big yacht. The,
You got to do an AI. This is the AI dinner,
AI,
so you have to talk about AI. So the AI investment you're going to make, unlimited capital. What are you going to do with it?
I'll put a data center in my yacht. How about that? Yeah. There we go.
There it is. You did it, Pro.
No, I'm just kidding. Exactly. I got it. Yeah. I mean, 8:30 or whatever it is at night after this, it's like you got to make people laugh at this point.
Da
Otherwise,
Vinci, DiCaprio. It's
This is good. This is good. We're in a flow. Let's keep going. What are you going to do with unlimited capital?
Oh my God.
This is our fun dinner conversation.
This is a fun. Well, I think about my P&L. Like the largest, the largest expense we have is compute. So what I would want to do is just do what I'm doing right now, which is then empowering people to tell stories and be able to create tools for them to do so. And so what I would do is I would license every piece of content out there in the world that I could get my hands on, so I could use it as training data and create those tools. And I would be able to, with infinite capital, I could train those models so quickly and provide all the inference that I would need for any of those storytellers to be able to make movies or series or games or advertisements, and we can all live happier. My motivations in AI are far less noble than many others. All I'm doing, I create content. That's what I'm doing. So, and I think the world's a better place with more creative people in it and more people who can actually express those ideas. And so that's what I would do. And I'd watch all of what they do from my yacht.
That's great. I love that. I love that. Kate, unlimited.
I'll do two things. One, invest in compute, and secondly, invest in people. So today in Africa and a lot of emerging economies, you don't have the same level of compute infrastructure as you have in the global north. So developers don't have access to GPUs. So making sure that we're able to close that compute gap, but also invest in all their ideas so they can actually scale and bring economic value in their country. This is what I would mostly splurge on.
Wonderful. Rohan.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting. I think both of you mentioned really targeting the creators, right?
Yeah.
People who are building, and I know we all are creators here, and many of us in this audience are. But I think sometimes we forget that we're the minority. Most of the world is not like us. They're not creators. They're not engineers. They're not designers. They're not developers. I think it's very important to go after the curator, the person, the rest of the population, 95%. And so I would really be investing in tools right now that go after that person, the person who can now leverage the kind of tools that we are creating here to then actually optimize part of their life, whether that's building imagery, whether it's building software, whether it's building geospatial imagery. It's really going after the business users in the world.
Grant.
I'll just try to be, I guess, a little bit contrarian, since all three answers were better than mine. I think that if you had unlimited capital, being able to invest in how AI could create new material science at real scale, I think would have one of the most powerful impacts on Earth, because so many of the things we do are a function of scarcity and resource scarcity. And AI has the opportunity to be really uplifting and create parity and democratize resourcing and infrastructure. And even, you could argue, AI itself is miniaturizing, democratizing, and making intelligence. What if AI was as fluid as the oil capital markets? And what if you could create an infrastructure where you could create this unit of intelligence that was compute, and you could really create a platform to create and go after the absolute hardest, most intractable problems like water, energy, batteries that don't require the unbelievably, I'll just say it, unsavory and arguably despicable practices for rare earth mining. You could use AI to go after those problems. The problem is those are the hardest problems. Yeah. And so if you had unlimited resources, I would go after the hardest problems. And I think resourcing is probably the highest on that list.
Well, I love this. We've had a great dinner conversation. We're going to have an opera singer, I think the first Saudi opera singer, come and join us with her beautiful voice. I want to thank you all for this conversation, for being fun dinner guests, and for being experts and creators in the space that is so important and critical in this day and age. So with that, thank you.